order to run the transaction, we need that authorization. Does that make sense at all?
Yeah.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask for like clarification or something like that.
So
if you need.
they can change any table or just specific
Oh,
tables?
specific tables,
Oh.
because there are other fields for the S_taboo disk. You know, I don't know if you guys have looked at that, see what other field entries are. I mean, there are the activities like change, create, but then there's other fields too that relate specifically to the table. Yeah.
Good to know.
So just having that authorization, it's going to be based on the fields in that authorization. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, and then number 2, if there are no permitted activities under an authorization object, for example, S_taboo CLI, does it mean that people who have this authorization object cannot do anything to the cross-client tables? Each authorization object protects something specific. So I looked at the documentation for this object, and it only protects cross-client tables when you run a specific transaction. So it's only when you're running that's SE31, SM30. You don't have to write that down. The documentation there, it only protects the cross-client tables when you run those transactions. So if a user was trying to edit a cross-client table using those transactions, then they wouldn't be able to do the activities. But there are other ways to edit cross-client tables, but this only protects it when you're running those transactions. So it's only for that one specifically. And the second part of that was, is it better? Oh, and the other thing is, even if they did have the authorizations to edit those tables, sometimes there are system settings that prevent the user from making those changes too, which we have so that you guys don't mess up other clients, basically. And then the second part was, is it better to remove activities than to remove the authorization object from the profiles? I think it's a matter of personal choice. In my mind, it's better to just remove the activities and leave the objects in there, because usually when the profile is created, the objects that are put in there are related to what you're trying to give to them. So if you leave that object in there, maybe later you can just change the activities rather than trying to find those objects, related objects. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Let me know if it works. Okay,
Yes.
good, okay. Number 3 in this computing sets, the CCMS, why should there be more than one operation mode, specifically day and night mode? In normal operations, it is good to have multiple op modes. I don't know if you guys looked at our system. Or I'm sure you guys did, but there's
Yeah.
only one op mode,
Yeah.
basically. Well,
And it was on all the time.
right,
It didn't
it's
stop.
like a normal operation
Yeah,
mode.
yeah.
Well, usually like in industry, you'll have, in the daytime, you have a whole bunch of users logged into the SAP GUI, so you have to have a lot of dialogue. Well, do you guys know, like the op modes, what that is? Like, there's the different processes, or?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's like dialogue process to handle the online, people online, and then there's other processes like background processes just to handle background jobs. So in our case, we don't have like end of day processes that run, because we're not a real industry. We don't have like inventory clearing every day, or running sales reports every day. So the amount of background jobs that we run in the evening are pretty minimal. So
Okay.
we have it configured to where there's enough background processes to handle the load. That's why we can have one. But normally you'd want to have more background processes running in the evening, and that's why you want a day and a night operation.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Number 4, when executing report RSUSR002 with transaction code SM01, we as auditors are on the list of users who have access to lock and unlock the T-codes, but we still can't execute it. Why is that? From my understanding of that report, it only checks to see if you can actually run or start the transaction. It doesn't actually check to see if you can successfully use the transaction. So I think when you run it, it says authorization not allowed.
Yeah, there's a little error message at the bottom, yeah.
So it actually started the transaction, but there are other objects that are checked to see if you can actually use that transaction. Like I had mentioned, that the authorization objects protect parts, like specific things. Well, that RCSR002 only checks like one object to see whether or not you can start it. But after you start the transaction, there's other objects that are checked. If you don't have those authorizations, then it's not going to continue on. And that's the problem you guys are missing. Authorizations to actually execute that SM01. So it's another object that's failing that you guys don't know. And then number 5, who should have access to SM01? For the most part, we just have the super users have access to SM01 because we don't want anybody, to lock transactions and, hey, students are like, hey, it's locked, we can't perform our stuff. So just super users, and then in some cases we have some faculty that have also access. It's basically users that have SAPL profile. And then number 6, what is the difference between unlocking unlocking a transaction code in SM01 and granting an authorization object? Well, SM01 allows or prevents the transaction from running regardless of the authorization object. It's kind of like a front door. Like if the SM01 has it locked, then nobody can run it. Like even as a super user, if it's locked, you can't run it. And then if it's unlocked, then theoretically anybody can run it. But when they try to run it, that's when the authorization object or authorization check occurs. So authorizations are so SM01 is system wide, so it occurs on all the clients if you lock it. And then versus granting an authorization object. An authorization object is specific to a client or a profile, and then I'd mentioned previously that the authorization object protects certain specific things. So let's say you're running a create material transaction. It's not just going to be an authorization to run that create material transaction. There's going to be other authorizations checked when you try to run that transaction.
Okay.
Like specific to a company code or things like that. Like it'll check to see if you're authorized to work with the company code.
Okay.
Okay, and then, so that's number 6. Number 7, I wasn't 100% clear what you guys were asking on this one. I think you were asking, is the CSU Chico server the central place where the local logs are sent? Do you guys?
I don't know. I didn't ask this one.
But,
I think we were talking to Menching. I was asking him what the difference. I don't remember exactly what I was asking him, but he was saying that at Chico they probably don't have a central one, and he was asking to ask if we actually do have a central place where all of the local ones go.
Okay, yeah. I was going to say we have all our separate SAP systems, and they have their own logs within each system, and then I mentioned right. We don't have like a central area where all the logs are sent. Usually, an SAP system is consisted of the central system, and then there's other servers that are connected to that system.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's Warsaw. I don't know if you guys logged into other servers. Like
No, we've only done Warsaw.
well, it's just Warsaw. Okay,
Just
usually
Warsaw.
there might be other computers hooked up to Warsaw that you connect to log into the SAP GUI, but it still connects to Warsaw.
Okay.
And those would have local logs that would be sent to Warsaw. But the way our setup is, each SAP system is just one central system,
Okay.
and those are all separate. Or yeah, they're all separate. We don't have the logs sent to each other.
Okay.
We noticed that one of the parameters in RSPARAM was different. Location of the log is directory versus just a D20. And then what is the DB, EB, NGS30? What that is it's part of the instance name, and it tells you what sort of processes are run on that server. Like dialog, update, in-queue, background. I don't know. You guys probably don't need to write that down, or you guys should Google it just to see what those mean.
Okay.
And the reason why the default is just D, the D stands for dialog. So if that server only ran dialog processes, it would only be able to serve the people's logging in through the SAP GUI. But because the server that we installed on is the central instance, it's just it has to have all those other services too.
Okay.
So that's why, yeah. I was gonna say if you guys were gonna be doing like technical stuff, that would be like a total interview question right there if you're working with SAP, or even if they'd be like, oh, what does that mean? If you don't know what that means, they're like, you must not be working with SAP, right? Yeah. Technical wise, I don't know if you guys. I mean, they still might ask you that question, so it might be different. But yeah, so our server is running all those other services. That's kind of how you can tell what the server is running, what processes are running.
Okay.
Okay, number 9, from what we understand, the current log, when it reaches a certain size, it deletes the old log file and then creates a new one active. That's true. You guys are right on that. And then whether you guys are wondering whether or not we archive the old logs, and we don't actually archive the old logs. We usually, if we need to look back in the system log, we can just look in there, and the amount that it saves is enough for us to see what we need to see. I don't think we've been ever in a situation where it deleted the stuff that we needed to see in the system log, so we've never
Okay.
really had to use to archive the old ones.
Okay.
Maybe one time we did, we're like, oh, we can't see what the error said, well, we'll just have to wait for the next time it comes up, or something like that. But yeah, we've never been in a situation where we really felt that we needed to do that. Plus we have so many systems we'd have to set up, backing up all those logs, so yeah, we haven't done that, we've never done that. Number 10, for how long will you keep the log of changes to master data? All those different types of data. Each semester, when a new class comes in, we refresh the client. So pretty much when you refresh the client, it wipes out all the data, including any of the changes. Like you can't see the change data because all the data is going to be gone or refreshed. So pretty much each semester is when that's until the end of the semester, because the whole system pretty much, the client, each of the clients gets wiped. That's how long the data is kept.
Okay. I just kind of had a quick question.
Sure.
I noticed there's a lot of users. Some of them kind of had like a deadline to where they get wiped out, and then others didn't. I was just wondering why some of them did.
A lot
and
of
some
them are
of them
probably just the default users that were in there, that were already created in the system.
Okay.
And most of those, well, I assume should be locked. Hopefully they're locked.
Yeah.
Or they're super users and they're not locked. So,
Okay.
yeah.
I saw there was a lot of super users too. Some of them were like he was going over it, and some of the people didn't even work here anymore, but they're still super users.
Oh,
So I was
would
kind of
they
wondering, should that be a
oh.
problem?
Well, usually those users are locked. Like we.
Oh yeah, they were locked.
Okay.
Yeah, they were
Yeah.
locked. But
Yeah,
I mean,
because we have like a master client that is based
Mhm.
that we copy from, so
Okay.
we haven't changed that master client from those users. But
Okay.
usually when we assign that client, we like lock all the users and then unlock the ones that you
Okay.
access. Okay.
okay.
But yeah, but yeah, once we create a new master client, we'll probably clean up the users again
Okay.
and then go from there. But yeah, we don't
Okay.
actually, because we have so many systems and clients, we don't.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we don't go to each client and delete each one or whatever.
Oh, okay.
It's only when we update the master client that we copy from.
Oh,
That we do that, so we can
okay.
clean up.
That makes sense.
Any other questions that you want to ask or clarifications maybe?
Just one more maybe
Sure.
in the 8.
Uh-huh.
So, did you answer, is there any reason if you change the default location?
Oh, yeah, the default location would indicate that the server was only running a dialog process
Right.
based on the name. So, because our system isn't just a dialog
Right.
instance, it runs all those other.
So, why
Other
they
servers.
keep, I mean, why they
Well-
keep the default one? I mean, is
Oh.
there any other reason you might want to change that?
Oh,
No.
or you might want to change that?
Mm-hmm.
Just specifically, no. Actually,
Okay.
I don't think so.
Okay.
I suppose if you
So-
changed,
I'm
like
gonna
what
find
you,
it.
if you changed like what you were running, like you stopped running one of these services, then you might need to change it. Yeah,
Oh,
to
okay.
indicate that you're not running that
Oh, okay.
service.
I see. Thank you.
But otherwise,
Mhm.
yeah, I don't think so. No.
Anyone else have a question?
Got everything.
Got it?
Okay, cool, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We really
Yeah.
appreciate
All
it.
right, cool.
Street clap. I don't know.